be reading you an excerpt from this novel that I just finished, and so I'm going to say a few things about it because it's a scene that's pretty late in the book. The novel is called No Other Life, and it takes place in the late 30s and early 40s. And the main character, Ellis, is a literary critic who married Dorian, maybe because he was a little bit in awe of her father, who was a respected writer. And she gave him a really hard time when they were married, and it wasn't until she had a breakdown after her father died that he realized that she was ill. What was then called manic depressive. There must be something in the water. Anyway, for a few years after that, he wasn't much of a husband to her until she had another breakdown and her brother forced her to go through shock treatment. And at that time, shock treatment was pretty brutal, and they were just starting to try and treat manic depressive illness with it. In the wake of this devastating experience, he and Dorian start over again, which means that he gives up his job teaching at a college and begins working in a local high school in Sonoma because a small town is easier for her, and that's where they live now. So it's 1942, and he is about to be called up in the draft. He knows the notice is going to come soon. He's very worried about how Dorian's going to manage without him, and afraid to talk to her about it because she'll just say, I'll be fine. And she has just come out of a bout of depression, or she's just coming out of it when this scene takes place. Dorian asked if they still had time for a walk before dinner. Ellis said yes. It had been raining all afternoon, but there was just a fine drizzle now, and she could walk for hours in any weather when she wanted to. Ellis rolled the dog's leash in his pocket and took an umbrella and a torch in case they had to come back in the dark. November rains were cold rains, winter's breath in the air, but he didn't warn Dorian to put on a warmer coat. When they stepped outside, the physical world was breathing its rain-washed gratitude, the air alive with the promise of greening, the odors of sap and grass and leaves and dirt. Maybe they were at the end of him coming home from school in the middle of the day. He would go straight to the bedroom, knowing she'd still be in bed, curtains drawn against the light. He would sit in the dark beside her still form, immovable stone that blocked his way. He would say that she should get up, she might groan. He would go to the kitchen to heat coffee. He would return to set the cup by the bed. He would say that she should get up. The coffee would grow cold. He would return to the kitchen to reheat it and bring it back, and she would not move. He would go back to the kitchen to make her lunch and set the plate on the table and think he had 30 minutes left, 25, before he had to be back at school. But the ticking clock didn't pierce the silence of the bedroom any more than a sharp oblong of light could have cut the lurking quality of that darkness. When the coffee grew cold a second time, when he was telling himself she was safer asleep anyway, she would lurch to her feet, snarling, I want to kill you. His stomach would rumble, and he'd wish he had time to cram down a sandwich. And then this day would come, and he could be amazed. Dorian stopped beneath their apple tree to scrabble in the grass for fruit bruised to the softness of plums. She pocketed a few, and they began walking out of town, passing quickly from streets of tree-shaded houses to open country, where the road was flanked by grape arbors and fields plowed under for the winter. Weeds and tall grass, still pale and papery from their parched summer, choked the rutted mud at the side of the road. They had to keep stopping. Dorian stared up into the branches of the tree, wondering why you never saw birds in the rain and how they hid themselves so well. She snapped off a stalk of lupin to examine his seed case, a pinwheel of emptied pods, and held it in her palm for him to feel the softly furred casings. They walked on, the dog coursing ahead of them and circling back to leap at Dorian and Ellis to reaffirm they traveled as a pack. Dorian had been reading an article sheet on snowflakes. Each crystal was unique, notched on its downward flight by the temperature and humidity of the air through which it passed, a precise and idiosyncratic record of its own fall. Tens of millions of molecules in every snowflake, she said. That much compression, that much intricate attention. Why does nature expend so much energy on this variant and not the other? Why don't we always get lumps of hail? God would be her reason. This is a trick question, Ellis said. I bet your students can't get a straight answer out of you either. They don't take my word for anything. Today we read Sonnet 130 in the junior class. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun, and they would not believe me that a poet who describes how his woman's breath reeks means to write a love poem. They're shocked by the insults. Dorian laughed. Good for them, giving you a run for your money. They did. He had been disarmed by these children, unable to help crowding him with their lives, still lived out in the open and under their parents' eyes. Big, capable farm boys who'd taken 2 weeks off for the harvest, stammering when he asked them to read aloud from the text. Girls clustered at his desk when the bell rang, bold and flirtatious so long as they stood in a crowd. Where his college boys would snuff their objections and take down the correct answer, these children were both more suspicious and more unguarded. They had to believe, to be for or against whatever you told them, even if it was just something from a book. I was sure you'd take my side, Ella said. The aim of teaching literature is to get around some of that good sense, some of the time. He sighed. I suppose it's an irrelevant exercise at the moment. Yes, Dorian said, now that the Army's decided to call up schoolboys. His mistake. Everyone caught in the same current now. Dorian said, I've almost finished that Faulkner novel you gave me. He's right up my alley, hanging his gems on every bough, ineluctable and indefatigable and irrefutable. As if Hemingway hadn't figured out how to strip out every excess word, Ella said. Your father would have approved of Hemingway's method, but not Faulkner's, she finished for him. Hemingway scouring the language of impurities and Faulkner just wallowing in them. The opposite tack trying to catch the same wind, to make a better instrument for feeling, which was exactly right. I had to go to college, she said. Picture her memorizing for a test and missing weeks of class because of another bout, her crackling mind stunned again by nothing to do. You could take a class and see how it goes, he said. I can't sit around all day waiting for you to show, she said. I need to make plans. Ellis had not been listening to her. I might not be drafted, he said. I'm not asking you to console me. They had come to a field where in better weather 2 horses usually grazed. They poked their heads out above the half doors of their stalls when Dorian whistled. She climbed the fence while Ellis stayed back with the dog, keeping hold of his collar. She was welcome here, and she crossed the field to offer each of the horses an apple from her pocket. They crunched the apples and blew into her cupped hand, and then she stroked their noses, her hand tracking so slowly over their velvet skin. As she came back across the field, the rain suddenly picked up, sheeting down from the sky, and she began to run and then stopped herself, holding her palms up to receive the drenching, to be taken by surprise. The name she'd give this was Grace. By the time she got to Ellis, her wet hair was forked and kinked over her collar. Though it was too late to do much good, he opened the umbrella. They sloshed home under a darkening sky, facing into the wind and the slanted rain. When Ellis turned on the torch, the dog leaped at the circle of light as it played on the ground. Both thought this was the thing he could catch. Dorian took the torch from Ellis and zigzagged it, baiting the dog into stalking the pearly white disc. I love how dogs think, Dorian said. They can be happy even when you're tormenting them. Whatever's next just is. It's a nice logic. If you never wonder why or what if, you never have any regrets. They don't have time to wonder why, Ellis said. They're too preoccupied wondering whether something smells as if maybe you could eat it. Dorian ducked from under the umbrella and stopped beneath a tree to listen to the timpani noise of rain scattering its leaves. If she'd never been ill, Ellis never would have known. This slow time in which his wife's eye could let in all available light, her ear take in every single note. If the same slowness could weight her and sink her, then what was left to her was so small a field of endeavor, provisional, but intricately worked, some gorgeous semblance. He could not quite relinquish grieving for what she'd surrendered, but at least he could glimpse what faith must be like, as if you lived at one with time and every element in its flow, woman, tree, grass, dripping leaves. Thank you.